Yeah, I think that's it. We will start now. I'd like to welcome you very much to the CAIDX webinar series. My name is Karen Lindegaard. I come from the Danish Life Science Cluster. And Danish Life Science Cluster is part of the CAIDX project, where we are working with clinical artificial intelligence-based diagnostic. First of all, I would like to apologize for the confusion with the links for signing or for getting into this webinar. But I can see everybody is coming on board now on the new link. So we will start up. We will try to shorten down a bit the presentation so that we will stay within the 1 hour time frame that we have decided. Before we start, I'll just go through a couple of house rules for the webinar. First of all, please keep your microphone muted and turn off your camera. If you have any questions, you are most welcome to answer questions. You can do that by placing them in the chat, and then I will either feed it into the discussion or we will take them in the end of the presentations. And then please note that the webinar is being recorded. And then finally, I'd like to tell you that you don't need to take a lot of notes and photos, etc., because the slides and the video of this webinar will be shared with you after the webinar. On that note, I would like to welcome Sandra Lide, and she's a legal specialist from Health Tech Finland, and Oliver Idle, he's a founder of Open Regulatory. So please welcome, and I'll pass on the word to you, Sandra.
Thank you so much, and very happy to be here. I'm just going to put on my presentation, just a moment. Okay, so good afternoon to everybody. Hello from sunny Finland. I can see that people are still coming online. Some people from Finland as well. Hi to all of you, very familiar names over there. And to everybody that I haven't met, I'm very happy that you're here today. And I hope that we can connect afterwards as well if you have any questions. So I was asked to talk about the upcoming AI regulation and answer the question of, will it change everything? Actually, it was a statement. The upcoming AI legislation, it will change everything, and a question, or will everything change? And I'm going to give you some insights to the changes that the new regulation will bring and how it's going to interact with the medical device regulation. So talking about these insights, so I represent Health Tech Finland, which is an industry association. So basically how these insights are built and what they're based on is industry discussions that I've had with the health tech industry and notified bodies, with competent authorities, standardization organizations, and so on. So personally, I don't delve into the depth of the regulatory issues, but I have a very large network with whom I sort of like talk about these issues, and that's how it comes up. And there's also a disclaimer, of course. All of the interpretations of the AI Act are, of course, preliminary. They can change during the implementation process as the understanding of the legal texts increases. So especially to those people who will be watching this video afterwards, please bear in mind that the AI Act has not entered into force yet, and many interpretations will become afterwards. So anyway, I thought that I would start talking about regulating medical AI in the EU context, and especially from the viewpoint of the MDR and the IVDR. So MDR stands for Medical Device Regulation, and IVDR for in vitro diagnostics regulation. So just setting the scene. Everyone knows that the health sector is already very heavily regulated, both nationally and internationally. And AI in healthcare is already a reality. And what I mean by AI being regulated already, for example, at a national level, that means that in many EU countries, you have patient regulation or legislation. You might have legislation for biobanking, for data use, for the use of data, for example, for research or development purposes. And those are the regulatory kind of tools that actually frame developing AI at the moment before the AI Act. So the development of medical algorithms is also and very heavily based on the MDR and IVDR, different guidance documents coming from the Commission, different standards on national legislation, and also on interpretations of competent authorities. So even though we have a common regulatory framework, we still have these independent competent authorities in the different countries, and they have the power to interpret the regulation independently. And that's why, even though we have the common regulation, then in the different EU countries, we still may have different interpretations for the same issues. So what I'm trying to say here is that the EU AI Act, it's not going to fill a gap in an empty or unregulated space. It will complement an already heavily regulated area, and the regulation will be possibly applied in parallel with the MDR and IVDR. And it will cover many AI systems already in use. So we still don't know, even though we're at this point of the regulation coming into force quite soon, we still don't know how much the AI Act will replace any of the rules and regulations of MDR and IVDR. So they are partially, at least, considered lex specialis in terms of the AI Act, which, however, does have a broader scope. And we still don't know that which will take precedence when we start applying the AI Act, and we are already applying the MDR and IVDR. What is clear is that the regulatory burden and the costs of doing business and the uncertainty of the legal landscape, they will all increase. The AI Act will potentially impact availability of AI-based medical devices in the EU market, and this is due to overlaps of the existing legislation. So there is a very, very strong need for alignment, and that is something that I'm going to be talking about today. So if we consider AI in the context of medical devices, the EU MDR or IVDR, they don't per se recognize AI as a separate concept or definition. It doesn't identify the special characteristics or features of the technology. Algorithms are, although mentioned in the regulatory text in annexes, but as a definition, algorithms are more of software which can be used in a medical device or as standalone medical devices. The MDR-IVDR regulation is based on risk assessment, intended use and life cycle principles, and it's not technology specific. So it's rather a framework that you have to comply with, but it's not technology specific. It's based on the idea of intended use. For example, if the algorithm is used in the medical context for prediction or prevention, diagnostics, therapy, or monitoring, you will most certainly be entering the MDR-IVDR world of medical algorithms. So they're governed by the same rules as other software, including requirements of safety, quality, risk assessment, clinical evidence, and conformity assessment. These are all the same issues that we will be tackling when we start applying the AI Act. So very familiar structure in both of these regulatory landscapes. So one of the challenges in the MDR IVD world is that they don't recognize the self-learning elements of AI. And it also operates with a concept of significant change, which in the MDR is very different from the AI Act substantial change. And also, the line between what is and what is not a medical device is still challenging. And this will also affect understanding what is a medical algorithm in the AI framework. And I think that Oliver's presentation will complement this one quite well. So if you have questions, I recommend listening to Oliver's presentation, and he's going to go a bit deeper into that. So about the AI Act and the current situation, this is a timeline. It was first proposed by the Commission in 2021. In 2023, many probably noticed in the very beginning of December on the 8th that the European Parliament negotiators and the Council presidency agreed provisionally on the final version. But I think it was a bit misleading. There was quite a lot of happiness and joy that, okay, the AI Act has been adopted, but in fact, it wasn't. In the background, there was still very much technical drafting going on. So once we got to the year 2024, the Council of Ministers approved the AI Act in February. And in March, just some days ago, the Parliament approved the AI Act. But many of you may have noticed that the final text is still absent. And this is due to the fact that it's still subject to some final lawyer linguistic checks before final endorsement of the Council, which will take place during the spring of 2024. I think maybe at the very end of April. The text still contains some mistakes, including mistakes in translation. So the final corrected version will be announced in April. And at the end of April, I think that we will have the final texts. And when does it come into force? On the 20th day after its publication in the Journal of the EU. And after that, it's going to become applicable after 2 years after entry into force. There will be transitional timelines, there will be national preparations, and the focus will shift from the EU level to the member states because there will be some national authorities that will be appointed, and then the oversight, guidance, supervision begins. And that's going to be a very big challenge for the different countries. So I know that Oliver is going to go through these transitional timelines at a glance at least, so I think I'm going to skip this one to save time and just go into what the AI Act actually is. It's a safety regulation for AI systems and general purpose AI models. So it basically aims at ensuring safety, protecting fundamental rights, and promoting innovation. And I've heard somebody say that this is sort of like product safety regulation, but it's converted into human rights language. The scope is very massive, and there is this assumption that the AI Act will increase trust in AI systems and models, and it'll increase their use and their demand at large. However, it will cover different parties, including development, introduction, sale, distribution, and utilization of AI systems. And this includes also organizations outside of the EU. Well, if we mirror this into the MDR world, that's also a regulatory piece that aims to protect health for patients and users. It takes into account the small and medium-sized enterprises which are active in the sector. It sets very high standards of quality and safety for medical devices, including AI software. And they're both based on risk assessment and classification. Now, what we've learned from the MDR world is that it's resulted, if you have a very big regulatory package, it's resulted in bottlenecks in certification procedures, availability problems, increased development costs, prioritization of maybe other markets, for example, the US market, and diversion of resources from research and development into regulatory costs. And this results in reduced access to safe medical technologies. Now, we've been practicing with the medical device regulation for years and years and years, and we have seen the problems that there are and there will be in implementing a large regulatory new concept or this whole framework. And that is the biggest worry of how it's going to affect the MDR world. And that is that people, or at least at the EU level, that there isn't enough understanding of what it takes to actually implement such a large piece of regulation, which is even larger than the MDR. This is a picture of the risk-based system of the AI Act. It has 4 different levels, 4 categories. There's unacceptable risk, high risk, limited risk, and minimal risk. We know that AI medical algorithms are inherently high-risk products, so they will be categorized in high risk, even if, and you know, some part of them might seem like they might be minimal or limited risk, but in a situation that these are safety regulated products, so they're already regulated, it means that they will most probably be in the high risk category. So here are a few of the requirements for high-risk AI systems. They may be familiar to you from the MD world. There will be a requirement for risk management systems, conformity assessment procedures, and this part especially is very challenging in the sense that there will be clashes both in the risk management system as well as the conformity assessment procedures. There will be clashes with the existing elements of MDR. For example, the different conformity assessment routes, they are very different in the MDR and the AI Act. So we don't actually know that which one will be applicable, or will they be applicable in parallel with each other. So will the chosen path need to be altered post AI Act implementation? We don't know. Also, we know that the AI Act demands conformity assessments for each new release of a high-risk AI system, which differs again from the MDR's sampling principles. There will be duplication of assessments that will constrain notified bodies even more than they've already been constrained. So there will be need for additional resources, harmonized standards, and the fear is that this will result in delays in access to medical devices in the EU market. Also, there are requirements for data governance, technical documentation, archiving, transparency, and what I've highlighted here is human oversight, because this is one of the big questions. What does human oversight mean in the medical device world? And that's something that I don't think that anybody really has an answer to yet. So that's why you really need to follow how the AI Act begins to be implemented in Europe. And then we gather the information and we share that information, and then we learn through that. Just a quick note about the impact assessment of fundamental rights. This is something very new that we haven't seen in the MDR world. So prior to deploying a high-risk AI system, deployers that are bodies governed by public law or private operators providing high-risk systems, these may be hospitals, for example, they will need to do the impact assessment of fundamental rights. Also, they need to make a notification to market surveillance authorities of the results, although temporary derogations are possible, but still everyone needs to do that. There needs to be training and support for staff, and also keeping logs is something new that will be introduced by the AI Act. This is my last slide before I hand it over to Oliver. So these are some recommendations. We know that the AI Act is a complicated piece of legislation, and it does risk hampering competitiveness of the AI ecosystem and also the medical device ecosystem. So there are certain recommendations that we can make. One is that technical standards need to be harmonized, guidelines, contractual terms and templates need to be harmonized. All legal overlaps need to be fixed. Also, the whole governance system, including supervisory and oversight issues, they need to be improved. We need simplified compliance for SMEs. And also we need access to high quality data sets, which maybe the European Health Data Space Regulation will support. But anyhow, our experiences from the medical device sector is that each and every one of these recommendations is a big challenge, is a big hurdle. It has taken many, many years on the medical device side, and we're hoping that those experiences can be used when we start implementing the AI Act. Thank you, everyone. And over to Oliver.
Cool. Shall I talk immediately now, or do you want to do a quick Q&A session? Or we can do the Q&A session at the end. Probably that makes the most sense. I'll just start sharing my screen with my talk, and then we can figure out what to do next. Okay. Oh God. Hopefully I don't screw this up. Okay. I think you are seeing something. Cool. Well, if I'm showing something else, just let me know. All right. So yeah, I think you already heard essentially in detail what the AI Act comprises of and what it means for you if you need to be compliant with it. I have a focus more towards startups and what it means to you if you're a startup or if you're planning to found a startup. So a quick background, I work at a company and I founded this company called Open Regulatory. The goal is to help healthcare companies with medical device regulation stuff. So we're really focused on the MDR, but also FDA approvals. And my personal goal, because I'm actually a doctor and a software developer, was to solve this once and for all and make all consultants unemployed, including myself. But that goal has not been achieved yet, obviously, because we are still running a consultancy. But I think one cool thing to note is we share a lot of stuff for free. So we open sourced all our templates, for example, which differentiates us from everyone else. So most startups in Germany actually know us and work with us. So this is just a random list of companies. All right. So as you already heard, what's the AI timeline? And again, my slides are probably just hugely simplified, and I'm a huge fan of simplifying things, especially in the regulatory context. So a few days ago, the European Parliament approved the AI Act, but what does this actually mean for you? That's kind of a big question. Actually, no one knows. So we can only guess that a few months later, it will enter into force because it still has to be finalized and then written down in the, I think, the journal of the European Commission. And then you have, and again, this is simplified again, you have 24 months to be compliant, or you have 36 months for high-risk systems, and most medical devices essentially are high-risk systems, at least some of them. So we'll look at that in the next few slides. Before that, this is actually redundant. So you already heard the 4 classifications of AI systems. So you have the unacceptable ones, which are prohibited. Then you have the high-risk systems. In simplified terms, high-risk systems in the context of today of healthcare software are medical devices higher than and including class 2A. I'll go into that in the next few slides, hopefully. You have quite a lot of requirements for those. Then you have something called a limited risk system. You have some transparency requirements. I think long story short, you can kind of just assume there are not a whole lot of requirements for those systems, because the AI Act, if you actually read it, and I'm not sure if any human actually has done that, because recently it was 450 pages, it mostly deals with high-risk systems. And then you have minimal risk systems, video games, spam filters, and so on, and those are unregulated. So that's probably the only good news today. If you want to do something unregulated, build a video game. All right, so what does this mean in practice? Again, it really depends on your medical device classification under the MDR. And I'm trying to not kind of go open another can of worms here talking about the classification, but I will attempt to keep it short. If you're class 1, you're probably fine. That's because the AI Act says you're only a high-risk system if you are simplified a medical device and you need an assessment by a notified body. And if you kind of think about this, class 1 devices don't need a notified body assessment. Again, simplified. Only class 2A devices and higher need one. So if you're a class 1 medical device, my assumption right now would be you are not a high-risk device under the AI Act, which puts you in a good situation, because then again, you're one of those limited risk systems. And as I mentioned, class 2A and higher, then you're a high-risk AI system, and you're, in short words, you're screwed. you have, because then you have all the requirements which the AI Act mentions. Now, the follow-up question, of course, is what the hell is an MDR class 1 software? And this question was, it's funny because the answer to that question seems to be changing across the years. So initially, under the MDR, the situation was that everyone said a class 1 software under the MDR does not exist because it's so, the definition is so restrictive. The funny thing is now that we actually see a ton of class 1 devices appearing on the market, so it seems to be possible. So what does this actually mean? If you look at, and again, I'm simplifying greatly, you become a class 2A device if you provide information which is used to take decisions with diagnostic or therapeutic purposes. Note the typo in the MDR here, diagnosis. So it's crazy that manufacturers are dealing with this pain every day, and the person who typed it didn't even check their words. so that's what we're dealing with. So in short, if you're providing diagnostic or therapeutic information or for that purpose, then you are likely a class 2A device. Let's look at some concrete examples, because I love concrete examples. Examples for class 2 software, A or B, for example, radiology AI software, and triaging and emergency medicine. So if you, on x-rays, if you highlight certain regions and say look, this patient is likely to have, I don't know, a broken bone, then that probably sounds like information for diagnostic purposes, and your class 2A software or 2B. Now, examples for class 1 software, this is kind of funny because the definition differs based on who audits you. But what I see is app for fertility tracking, apps for treating depression, and an app for a symptom diary. So kind of what you would personally classify as harmless software. But again, the definition is kind of screwed up, because we at our company, we actually analyze this, and all of this is online on our website, openregulatory.com. You can kind of see, you can publicly see which companies have brought a class 1 device to market and where they're located. And the super funny thing is, and tragic thing is, that you have different interpretations based on where the company is located in Germany, for example. So in Berlin, no class 1 device exists because the Berlin competent authorities, the people who audit class 1 companies, they have the personal opinion that a class 1 device doesn't exist. So if your startup's in Berlin, you're essentially screwed if you want to bring a class 1 device to market. However, if you're located in a different state in Germany, Hamburg being the best example, then it's entirely possible. And you have this situation across countries too. So some countries are more hands-off, and some countries are more involved in their interpretations of what a class 1 device is. So this is an MDR problem, not even related to the AI Act, but it might become related because, again, in my interpretation, as a class 1 device, you are not a high-risk device. So it might be even more incentive to bring a class 1 device to market in a country which allows you to bring a class 1 device to market. Now let's go through a few scenarios here, assuming you're MDR class 2A. So this is kind of the more, I guess, the more common scenario. Then you have all the requirements of high-risk AI systems. And again, we already heard all of those, so I'll just really skim over those. You have to do a risk management system. You have to do something called data governance, technical documentation, keep records, whatever that means, provide instructions for use, human oversight, and so on and so on. I think the extremely short summary of this is a lot of this, and we already heard that too, is already required by the MDR. So you already need to have a quality management system, you already need to have technical documentation, and you have to have a risk management system. And now the question is how those requirements will overlap with the AI Act requirements. And I wish I could kind of give you a smart answer to that. The short answer is I don't know, and no one knows. And in the regulatory field, it's the default to not really understand things very well. So I've been in this industry for multiple years and obviously lead a consulting company, but I still every day get up in the morning and have no clue what the hell this means for companies. So what you essentially will be waiting for is some sort of harmonization to happen, that somebody within the EU will kind of merge these MDR requirements with the AI Act requirements. And until we have that, we literally just don't know. And as a startup, we just kind of say, do nothing and you're fine. So how do you comply? We also don't really know that. It's likely that your notified body will also check the AI Act requirements. So if you kind of like remember this as a Class 2A device and higher, you need to get audited before you enter the market, which essentially means that a lot of people check your, well, 2 or 3 people check your documentation and kind of like assess based on your documentation whether your product is safe. If you think this sounds crazy, it is. Like, they won't read your code, they will read your documentation, which is an entirely other like problem. But it's likely that those people might also check whether you comply with the AI Act. The other scenario would be that you need another notified body. So to maybe give a quick introduction, notified body is this like private institution which you pay to audit you. And if that sounds like a conflict of interest, I think you might be onto something. So for example, as a company, you would like pay TÜV Süd in Germany to audit you as a medical device manufacturer, and then they would kind of like, yeah, approve you or decline you. And it's possible that these institutions will also check the AI Act requirements. Regardless, as I mentioned, wait and see. Currently, in my opinion, there's nothing you need to do. Might be an unpopular opinion among consultants. Oh yeah, and hopefully our website will have lots of free information in the future. Again, we publish templates for free. Now I have like a slightly other angle coming at this. So if you are like a founder or a future founder and are considering building a startup in, I don't know, in one of the countries in the EU, obviously as part of this theme of this webinar, you're probably in the EU. So what should you do? That's a really good question. Sometimes I ask myself, what would I do if I would build a new startup? I think like I have a few hacks or ideas I would like to share with you, which might be useful for you. So go for MDR Class 1 because it's less regulated, but don't do it in Berlin because Berlin still has this opinion of Class 1 not existing, and some other states and some other countries might have the same opinion. So kind of like, yeah, check out where to go, but you could go for Class 1. I mentioned examples for Class 1 software earlier, so I won't mention them again. You could even go further and not build a medical device at all. So what I would call a lifestyle device. You can think of some examples there, like things which kind of like sound a bit medical, but are not really medical devices. For example, telemedicine software is a great example. It's actually not a medical device. Or just like stuff like meditation software, like Headspace, the app, quite famous. That's also not a medical device. You can just ship it. And a few others, like a lot of cool opportunities there. Or if you want to build a medical device, you could launch in a less over-regulated country, which would be maybe the US or even Asia. That might be an interesting theme and might actually be really interesting to see what AI companies will do now that the AI Act will come into force at some stage. I just don't think, well, to say the least, I think we won't be attracting AI startups in the future. Or if your time horizon isn't that far, you could just like launch now and figure things out later, because there are like quite a few transition periods to look into. And again, I simplified this by the way a bit, so 24 months doesn't necessarily always apply to you. All right, so what's my opinion on this? I think we're essentially over-regulating, but I'm not sure if anyone asked me for my opinion. But I think like one of the biggest problems is the text which was recently adopted was 459 pages long. So it's literally, the huge irony is probably we hardly have humans at all on the planet who have read all of these pages and understand all of it in its entirety. So everyone might be using like ChatGPT and other tools to just understand what the hell the AI Act means for them. Would have been very useful if it would have been simpler and shorter. It's a good idea to prohibit like the evil AI systems, the ones in the like prohibited category right now. But that being said, are we really sure that we can name those categories right now? Like, AI is still in its infancy, and essentially things are happening every week, and like new models are being released and so on, new use cases. And it's kind of like extremely early to already have that opinion on what AI use is allowed or not. And maybe some cool thought, which I just had with another startup founder, he had that thought was that regulating a technology by itself is usually not something which is done. So we don't have something like a database act for regulating databases. like if you use a database, it depends on the context in which you use it. And the AI Act is very different. It regulates the technology. So it is a very weird situation. It makes sense to regulate AI systems, which are high risk, but we actually don't know much about the harm being caused, again, because all of this is so new. We actually, and the most important thing is we have no data on whether the proposed regulations lead to higher safety causally, in a causal sense. We, by the way, also don't have this for medical devices. So we cannot say like, look, because this and this requirement in the MDR, because of writing technical documentation, because of that, less patients have been harmed. We simply don't have that data, which is crazy. So essentially doing an intervention where we simply don't know what the outcome might be. What would a better approach be? Well, probably something like more of a like lean, hands-off approach to gather some data first, require manufacturers of AI systems to register themselves in some sort of central database, and just maybe collect incidents and harms where people or groups of people have been harmed by AI. But that would have been my idea, but I'm not the person who writes these regulations. So instead of like, I guess these two ideas, we have 459 pages of other things. That could have been a good like data, like a collection of data to come up with useful regulations. Yeah, so one funny thing is like if the AI throttles innovation, maybe the AI will regulate throttling. So I thought that was pretty funny. I think like we're kind of like we're in a bad situation because we already don't have, essentially we have Mistral and France as a leading AI company, but besides those, like we really don't have the leading AI startups and companies in the EU. And this will become even more significant now that we regulate it without really knowing the dangers. All right, so here's the quick mention of my company actually. And again, our incentive is to solve this problem, not earn a lot of money. We're 5 people right now. We do a ton of free stuff. So we have a free Slack community, which is geared towards medical device compliance. You can just join and have like around 800 other founders in there who help each other out doing audits. It's entirely free. We have 0 incentive to sell anything to anyone there. And again, we publish all our templates for free, hopefully some AI Act templates in the future, but for now, we already have a complete set of MDR templates, which you can literally just take and download in Markdown or Word format or whatever, and get your compliance done. So check out our website, which is openregulatory.com, and then you can find the templates by going to /templates. All right, I'll keep it short because probably there are a ton of questions, I would guess, like usual in these regulatory talks. These are like the ways you can reach me. But besides that, I'm done. And yeah, if you have questions, I think you can type them into the chat.
Thank you, Oliver and Sandra, for great presentations. You answered all the questions that I had imagined that I would ask you beforehand, but luckily, yes, there is a lot of questions. There's one question in the chat that I think Oliver already answered, so I will not touch upon that. Then there's a relatively long comment or question. I'll read it up. It's from Tom Kane. It says, Sandra, in my mind, one of the great achievements of the Spirit projects was the cross-industry standard protocol for data mining. Do we need a newer and more ambitious project which looks at the 4th industrial revolution issues of cyber-physical and AI systems, which will act in medical domains? Big worry is sharing all of Europe's medical data sets with chatbots or learning systems via OpenAI or ChatGPTs, rather than having European AI large language model AI tools, which are strictly regulated by the European lawmakers. It was a lot. Does it
I'm
make
not sure
sense?
I caught the question.
I cannot make sense of this question, unfortunately.
No,
Same.
it's more like a statement, but as I understand it, they ask, do we need, wait.
An ambitious project.
Do we need a newer and more ambitious project which looks at the 4th industrial revolution issues of cyber, physical, and AI systems?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, Yes, absolutely. All new research and evidence on these issues is very important, but I think that the next step within the AI framework is to start implementing and going to the national level and actually finding the right authorities, competent authorities, and giving guidance to the field. And after we get those interpretations and after we get the guidance, I think it's going to be clear for everybody to understand what kind of projects we need. So maybe just, wait for a while. That would be my advice.
Yeah. Then there's another question here from Frederick Bastrup. He asks, how about in-house under MDR 5.5? What are the changes to that?
Well, there is no change to the MDR 5.5. It's a safety regulated area, so that would be high risk categorized in the AI Act. Oliver, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I'm looking up MDR 5.5. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. So those are in-house devices which you manufacture inside of a health institution. I mean, the general question for me is like, as far as I remember, those typically don't have a notified body. And if I interpret the AI Act correctly, it would not necessarily be a high-risk device then, because the high-risk device is defined as you build a device which is an Annex 2, which is a medical device, for example, but which also needs a conformity assessment by a notified body. And if an in-house device does not need an assessment by a notified body, then by definition, it would not necessarily be a high-risk device. So
yes, this is true.
Short answer is you only have the limited requirements of the lower risk category where you have like whatever transparency requirements and so on. So my guess would be not much changes, but again, I might be wrong.
There's just one point to that. In Helsinki University Hospital, for example, there has been some very high level algorithmic developing and much discussion about possibly taking that to the commercial market, because if you have like a unique innovation, you would like to commercialize that, even though it's produced in-house. So in those situations, you do have to then look into, will you be needing the notified body, and then would that mean that it's a high risk product in the AI Act?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, there's another question coming in. It's from Jose Manuel Cerdan, and he says, do you believe that AI tools designed to assist research clinicians in identifying gaps in their specialty and expediting the scientific article writing process should fall under regulation as outlined in the EU AI Act?
I mean, generally speaking, if you like look at the intended use of such a software, it's as he mentioned, like it's like helping in this case like specialists essentially help with their research or understanding like their specialty. That by itself does not seem to be a high-risk device, but then again, it still would fall under the AI Act, but possibly like as in one of the lower risk categories. So yeah, I guess there are like two questions to that. Like, what category would it be? Likely low risk, but then what would you need to do? Like, you would need to like fulfill these like transparency requirements, among other things.
Thanks. And then there's a question from Tilla Mervi. She asks, would IVD devices having AI also considered as a high-risk medical device? So now we're into IVD.
My understanding is that yes.
Yes.
So I can add to that is, again, under the IVDR, you also have different categories again. You have A through D, so A, B, C, and D. There was one, like generally speaking, most of these need a notified body nowadays, but you do have one category which does not need a notified body. I think it's D. I think it's what's D and not A. Anyway, I think like there's one category. Oh, it's A. Oh man, I'm so bad. So you have the one category which doesn't need a notified body. Again, in my understanding, if you don't need a notified body, even if you are building an IVD, you would not be a high-risk device. That's my reading of the AI Act. If I'm wrong, please someone correct me. I don't claim to be
No,
right.
that's my understanding as well. So the
Okay.
low risk classes in the MDR and IVDR, where you don't need a notified body, then the assumption is that that would not be high risk in the AI Act.
Cool.
And there's another question here from Sandra Henninen. She asks, how will the new AI Act affect technical documentation requirements for medical device software containing AI?
Yeah.
I suppose that is really important when you look into the time frame.
The short answer, I suppose, is I don't know. The longer answer is it will probably you will be doing kind of like the same stuff you're already doing. For example, for your risk analysis, you have to analyze what can go wrong and how can patients get hurt essentially when your device is being used. And then probably the likely outcome might be that content-wise within these frameworks, you have to do additional work. So for example, in your risk analysis, you would not only analyze risks how patients get hurt, but also like cybersecurity risks of like what happens if someone hacks you and changes up your AI model, or if your AI model was trained on the wrong data, and so on and so on. So probably I would say like the number of new activities you have to do is probably low, but you will probably have to do more work in the existing activities you're already doing.
Yes, I can echo that. So I think that many of the things that you're already doing, you're doing the right thing. And once the AI Act is implemented, then you'll have to amend the technical documentation, and you will be given guidance from the notified body at that point.
Thanks a lot. I think that was all the questions we had from the participants, but I had a couple of questions prepared also. One of the questions I want to go back to once again, because we only touched on upon that very briefly. It's the change for the users of AI, so the implementers. If a hospital buys an AI solution and implements it, what is the change for them? What is it that they really have to do differently in the future?
That would be the assessment, I would say. What did I say that it was called? Sorry, I have to look at my papers. The impact assessment of fundamental rights. So that's one of the most important ones. So that's something that you're going to have to face. And also the training and support for staff and all the logging activities. But one thing, is that I think that many of the hospitals will begin working with companies, with the industry side a bit more, probably, unless they have in-house manufacturing. And one thing to be sort of careful with is that because you have these different hospital systems, you can't just take an algorithm from an industry manufacturer and just take it and implement it into the hospital systems. You have to have really close discussions with the different manufacturers and maybe even build these special clinical how do you call them, like these secure data environments where you can put the algorithm, and it's probably not safe to just take it into clinical use.
Maybe one thing which I can add is it might really depend on whether the hospital in that case changes the intended use of the AI system. So if you I think that was my initial interpretation of the AI Act. So if you as a hospital in theory don't change the intended use of an AI system. So for example, you buy something from a medical device manufacturer, like some sort of AI software, and deploy it in your hospital. In simple terms, you might not have that many obligations because you just deployed it, but the intended use of the system is as specified by the manufacturer. But this is in contrast to if you change the intended use. So for example, if you kind of use ChatGPT, which has a very generic intended use, which falls under general purpose AI, and you deploy it in your hospital to kind of triage patients, for example, then you're obviously changing the intended use. And then you have way more obligations, I think essentially on the level of a manufacturer. So that might also be just like adding to what Sandra said.
Yeah, and there's a comment to that actually that fits very well. It's Frederick again saying it's a medical device. Why it's safe to use off the shelf? Isn't it that the whole idea about MDR or MDD?
I'm not sure if I follow that question. So
No.
if it's safe to use, what off the shelf? A
Yeah.
medical
So
device
if
or
you
like an
buy
AI
a
system? Yeah.
if you buy a solution that already has been approved, why do you then again need to go back and monitor if it's safe to use or the intended use? That's how I understand it.
No, my comment had more to do with the fact that you take the AI solution and include it into an existing program, software, something like that, that is already in the hospital, because the manufacturer of that preliminary solution, of course, is responsible for that it's being used like they've planned it to be used. So if you add something more into that, then you do have to make those checks or take responsibility yourself.
Thank you very much. I think there's more questions coming in, but I think we are running out of time, and I actually think that the last questions that are coming in and the last part of this discussion fits very well into what I'm going to say now, namely that you have joined this webinar series, and the next webinar will be on Monday, the 25th of March at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and it will look into clinical validation of AI diagnostic solutions. And there are really cool presenters in the next webinar as well. So I hope to see you there. And that's it for now. Bye-bye.
Great.
And
Bye-bye. Thank you,
Thanks for
everyone.
listening.